The war room smelled of fear. Queen Valethris could sense it in the air, thick and heavy like smoke. Her generals stood around the holographic table, their silver skin pale with exhaustion, their 4 eyes avoiding her gaze. The projection showed her empire in red. Red for lost territory. Red for destroyed fleets. Red for the blood of millions. "We have lost the Tessian corridor," General Morath said, his voice hollow. "The Vorax pushed through our defensive line 3 hours ago. 12 ships destroyed. No survivors." Valethris said nothing. She had stopped counting the losses weeks ago. The numbers had become too large, too painful. The Vorax dominion had come from the outer rim like a plague, their black ships cutting through Kirani space with terrible efficiency. In 2 months, they had taken 3 star systems. In 2 months, they had done what no enemy had accomplished in 1,000 years of Kirani history. They had made her afraid. "Your Majesty," Admiral Kireth spoke carefully, "perhaps it is time to consider alternative solutions." "You mean surrender?" Valethris said. The Admiral lowered his head. "I mean survival." The Queen looked around the room at her advisors, her generals, the finest military minds of her species. She saw defeat in every face. The Kirani had lived in peace for so long that they had forgotten how to fight. They had built beautiful cities, created magnificent art, explored the mysteries of the universe. But they had never learned to be warriors. And now, when they needed warriors most, they had none. "Leave me," she said quietly. "All of you." They filed out in silence, grateful to escape her presence. Valethris stood alone in the war room, watching the red spread across the map like a disease. She thought of her mother, the previous queen, who had ruled during the golden age of peace. She thought of her daughter, still a child, who might never see adulthood if the Vorax reached the crown world. For the first time in her life, Queen Valethris of the Kirani Empire did not know what to do. 12,000 light-years away, on a small blue planet called Earth, Danny Cole was drinking his 3rd beer of the evening. The bar was nearly empty. A few construction workers sat at tables talking about sports and complaining about their bosses. The television on the wall showed alien news broadcasts, something that had become normal in the 5 years since first contact. Most people ignored it. The war between the Kirani and the Vorax was happening far away, in places with names nobody could pronounce. It was not their problem. Danny watched the screen with tired eyes. He was 34 years old, with rough hands and a body built by years of physical labor. Before construction, he had been a Marine. Before the Marines, he had been a troubled kid from a broken home. Life had not been easy for Danny Cole. But he had survived. That was what he did. He survived. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and saw a message from his sister Katie. "Danny, I need help. I'm stuck on Thessar 4. The evacuation ships are gone. The Vorax are coming. I don't know what to do." Danny read the message 3 times. Then he put down his beer, paid his tab, and walked out of the bar. Katie was 10 years younger than Danny. She was smart. Smarter than anyone in their family had ever been. She had gotten scholarships, gone to university, studied xenobiology. When the opportunity came to work on a Kirani border world, she had jumped at it. Danny had told her it was dangerous. Katie had laughed and called him an overprotective old man. Now she was trapped on a planet that was about to become a battlefield. Danny went home and packed a bag. He took his old military gear, his savings, and nothing else. By morning, he was at the spaceport, buying a ticket on a cargo freighter heading toward Kirani space. The ticket agent looked at him like he was crazy. "Sir, that region is a war zone. We cannot guarantee your safety." "I'm not asking you to," Danny said. The journey took 11 days. Danny spent most of it alone in a small cabin, watching news reports about the war. The Vorax were winning everywhere. The Kirani were retreating, dying, begging the galactic community for help that never came. Earth had a trade alliance with the Kirani, but that was all. Humans were too new to space, too weak, too primitive to matter in a conflict between ancient stellar empires. Danny did not care about empires. He cared about his sister. The freighter dropped him off at a space station on the edge of Kirani territory. From there, he caught a refugee transport heading to Thessar 4. The ship was packed with Kirani civilians fleeing the war, their silver bodies pressed together in fear. They looked at Danny with curiosity. Humans were rare in this part of space. Strange creatures with only 2 eyes and skin in shades of brown and pink. A young Kirani child pointed at him and asked her mother, "What is that?" "That is a human," the mother said, "from the blue planet. Why is he going toward the war?" The mother had no answer. Danny arrived on Thessar 4 to find a world falling apart. The capital city was choked with refugees. Buildings had been damaged by bombing raids. The streets were filled with Kirani soldiers who looked lost and afraid. Above them, the sky was dark with smoke from distant fires. He pushed through the crowds, asking everyone he met about Katie. Nobody knew anything. Communications were down. The evacuation centers were overwhelmed. The Vorax were 3 days away, maybe less. Finally, after hours of searching, Danny found her at a medical station near the old university. Katie was covered in dirt and blood, helping Kirani doctors treat wounded soldiers. When she saw her brother, she stopped and stared as if he were a ghost. "Danny, what are you doing here?" "Getting you out," he said. Katie shook her head slowly. "I can't leave. These people need help. Look at them, Danny. They're dying, and there's nobody else." Danny looked around the medical station. He saw Kirani soldiers with terrible wounds, civilians crying over dead family members, doctors working with exhausted desperation. He saw suffering on a scale he had never witnessed before. He thought about his sister. He thought about the war. He thought about all the times in his life when he had walked away from trouble, kept his head down, minded his own business. Then he took off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. "All right," he said. "Tell me what to do." Outside, the sound of distant explosions echoed across the city. The Vorax were coming, and somewhere in the chaos, a single human had decided to stay. The next 2 days were the longest of Danny's life. He worked without rest, carrying supplies, moving patients, doing whatever the doctors needed. The Kirani were surprised by his strength. Humans were smaller than them, softer looking, but Danny could lift things that made their soldiers struggle. He moved through the chaos like a machine, never stopping, never complaining. Katie worked beside him when she could, but her skills were needed elsewhere. She was one of the few people who understood both human and Kirani biology, which made her valuable to the medical teams. Danny was proud of his sister. She had always been the smart one, the one who would do something important with her life. He was just muscle, but muscle was needed here. On the second night, Commander Cyrith came to the medical station. Cyrith was tall even for a Kirani, with dark silver skin and eyes that had seen too many battles. She commanded what was left of the Planetary Defense Force, a few thousand soldiers holding a line that everyone knew would break. She had come to check on her wounded troops and to prepare for the evacuation of the medical station. "We have transport ships coming tomorrow," she told the head doctor. "We will move everyone to the Eastern District and try to get off planet before the Vorax arrive." The doctor nodded wearily. "And if the Vorax come before then?" Cyrith did not answer. There was nothing to say. She noticed Danny carrying a wounded soldier across the room. The human moved with purpose, his face hard with concentration. Cirith had heard about him from her troops, the strange alien who had appeared from nowhere and refused to leave. "Who is that creature?" she asked. "A human," the doctor said. "He came to find his sister. He stayed to help." "Humans," Cirith said thoughtfully. "I have read about them. A young species. Primitive. Violent. He has been very useful." Cirith watched Danny set down the soldier gently, check his bandages, then move on to the next task, without pause. There was something in the way he moved, something she recognized. He had been a warrior once. She could see it in his eyes. The next morning, the evacuation began. Thousands of refugees filled the streets, moving slowly toward the eastern district where the transport ships waited. Danny helped organize the flow of people, directing traffic, carrying children, supporting the elderly. The Kirani soldiers watched him with confusion. Why was this alien working so hard for people who were not his own? Danny did not think about why. He just worked. The Vorex air raid came at midday. The first explosion hit a building 2 blocks away, sending fire and debris into the sky. People screamed and ran in every direction. The careful order of the evacuation collapsed into chaos. More explosions followed, walking across the city like the footsteps of an angry giant. Danny grabbed Katie and pulled her into a doorway as a piece of metal flew past their heads. Around them, Kirani civilians were falling, crushed by rubble, burned by fire. The soldiers tried to maintain order, but they were just as scared as everyone else. Something inside Danny changed. The fear he felt, the confusion, it all went away, replaced by something cold and clear. He had felt this before, years ago, in places he tried not to remember. His body knew what to do, even when his mind did not. He started shouting orders. "Everyone into the buildings! Get away from the street! Move! Move! Move!" The Kirani stared at him. They did not understand his words, but they understood his tone. They followed his pointing hands, his pushing arms, his fierce eyes. Danny directed them into doorways, into basements, into any shelter he could find. A building nearby began to collapse. Danny saw a group of Kirani children frozen in fear, directly in the path of falling stone. He ran. He reached them just as the wall came down. Without thinking, he pushed them aside and raised his arms against the falling debris. A massive beam struck him, driving him to his knees. The weight was incredible, crushing, impossible. He felt the skin on his arms burning from hot metal. But he did not let go. He held the beam long enough for the children to crawl away. He held it long enough for soldiers to reach him and pull the debris aside. Then he collapsed onto the ground, his arms covered in burns, his body shaking with pain. Commander Cirith reached him moments later. She had seen everything from across the street. She had watched this small, soft alien run toward danger instead of away. She had watched him lift weight that should have killed him and hold it through pain that should have broken him. "Why?" she asked, kneeling beside him. "Why did you do that?" Danny looked up at her with eyes that were somehow still clear despite the agony. "Because someone had to," he said. The air raid ended an hour later. The Vorex bombers flew away, leaving behind a city of fire and death. But the evacuation continued. The survivors picked themselves up and kept moving, because there was no other choice. Danny refused to stay at the medical station. Katie bandaged his arms and begged him to rest, but he shook his head. There was still work to do. People still needed help. He walked back into the streets with burned arms and a steady heart. The Kirani soldiers began to follow him. They did not know why. He was not their commander, not even one of their species. But there was something about him that made them want to follow. He was not the biggest or the strongest or the smartest. But he did not stop. No matter what happened, he did not stop. Commander Cyrith filed her report that night. She wrote about the evacuation, the casualties, the damage to the city, and she wrote about the human. "There is something different about this species," she wrote. "They are small and weak compared to us. They live short lives on a small planet far from the center of the galaxy. But this one human showed more courage today than I have seen from any Kirani soldier in this entire war. I do not understand them, but I believe we should try to." Her report traveled up the chain of command, from officer to general, from general to admiral. And eventually, it reached the war room on Kairos Prime, where Queen Valethris sat alone, searching for hope in a universe that seemed to have none left. She read the report 3 times. Then she sent a message to Thessar 4. "Bring me the human." The royal ship arrived 3 days after the evacuation was complete. By then, Danny had become something of a legend among the survivors. Stories spread through the refugee camps about the human who had held up a building, who had walked through fire, who never seemed to sleep or eat or rest. Most of the stories were exaggerated. Some were not. When Commander Cyrith told him the Queen wanted to meet him, Danny thought she was joking. "I'm a construction worker from Arizona," he said. "What does a queen want with me?" "I do not know," Cyrith admitted. "But when the Queen calls, you answer." Danny looked at Katie. She was exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but she was smiling. "Go," she said. "This is probably the most interesting thing that will ever happen to you." "More interesting than an alien invasion?" "Okay. Second most interesting." The journey to Kairos Prime took 4 days. Danny spent most of it staring out the window at stars he could not name. He had never been good with silence. Back home, he would fill quiet moments with work or drink or television. Here, there was nothing to do but think. He thought about the children he had saved. He thought about the soldiers who had started following him. He thought about the burned skin on his arms, still healing, still hurting. He did not think of himself as a hero. Heroes were people in movies, people with special powers and perfect plans. Danny was just a guy who did not know how to walk away. Kairos Prime was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The planet glowed like a jewel against the darkness of space. Its cities were made of crystal that caught the light of 3 moons. Its oceans were purple, its forests silver, its mountains touched the clouds. Danny had grown up in the desert, in a trailer park on the edge of a dying town. He had never imagined places like this existed. The royal palace stood at the center of the capital city, a tower of white crystal that seemed to grow from the ground like a living thing. Danny was taken through endless hallways filled with art and light and aliens who stared at him like he was an animal in a zoo. He was dirty, tired, and completely out of place. The throne room was bigger than a football field. Thousands of Kirani filled the space. Nobles in fine clothes, military officers in uniform, advisors with data tablets and worried faces. They parted as Danny walked through, creating a path to the throne at the far end of the room. The whispers followed him like wind through grass. Queen Valethris sat on a throne made of crystal and starlight. She was taller than any Kirani Danny had seen, her silver skin almost white, her 4 eyes sharp and ancient. She wore a crown that seemed to be made of frozen lightning. She looked like something from a dream, beautiful and terrifying. Danny stopped at the base of the throne. He did not know if he should bow or kneel or salute. He decided to just stand there and wait. The Queen studied him for a long moment. "You are the human," she said. Her voice was like music, soft and powerful at the same time. "Yes, ma'am," Danny said. "My name is Danny Cole." I have read the reports about you, Danny Cole. You came to our space to find your sister. You stayed to help our people. You risked your life for strangers who are not your species. She leaned forward slightly. I want to understand why. Danny thought about the question. He had been asked it many times over the past few days, and he still did not have a good answer. I came for my sister, he said. That's easy. She's family. You don't leave family behind. And the rest? The evacuation? The children you saved? Danny shrugged. People were dying. I could help. So I helped. But why? The Queen's voice was more intense now. You could have taken your sister and left. You could have saved yourself. Why stay? Why risk everything for people you do not know? The throne room was silent. Every eye was on Danny. He felt small and stupid. A primitive creature standing before an ancient civilization, trying to explain something he barely understood himself. Where I come from, he said slowly. We have this idea. It's not complicated. When someone needs help, you help them. When something is wrong, you try to make it right. You don't do it because you'll get a reward. You don't do it because someone is watching. You do it because it's the right thing to do. Even if it costs you your life? Especially then, Danny said. Look, I'm not a philosopher. I'm not smart like my sister. But I know one thing. The measure of a person isn't what they do when things are easy. It's what they do when things are hard. When everything is falling apart and running away would be safe and staying would be dangerous. That's when you find out who you really are. The Queen was quiet for a long time. The nobles around her shifted uncomfortably. They had expected something more. Some grand philosophy, some secret wisdom from this strange alien species. Instead, they had gotten simple words from a simple man. But Valethris understood. She had watched her generals argue about strategy and resources. She had listened to her advisors debate politics and alliances. Everyone had complicated plans, sophisticated theories, elegant solutions. And none of it had worked. None of it had stopped the Vorax. None of it had saved her people. Maybe what they needed was not sophistication. Maybe what they needed was simplicity. The simple courage to stand up when everything said to run. The simple stubbornness to keep fighting when everyone said to surrender. She saw it in this human's eyes, a fire that her own people had lost. Not intelligence, not technology, just the raw, stubborn will to never give up. Danny Cole, the Queen said, I want you to stay. I want you to teach my people what you know. The nobles gasped. The generals looked outraged. A primitive alien advising the Kirani Empire? Danny looked around at the shocked faces, then back at the Queen. Ma'am, I'm not a teacher. I'm barely educated. I don't know anything about space wars or alien politics. You know how to fight, Valethris said. Not just with weapons, but with spirit. You know how to stand when others would fall. That is what we need. She stood from her throne, and the entire room fell to their knees. Will you help us, Danny Cole? Danny thought about home. He thought about his simple life, his simple job, his simple dreams. He thought about Katie, about the children on Thessar 4, about all the people who would die if the Vorax won. Yeah, he said, I'll help. The Kirani generals hated Danny from the first day. They gathered in the war room, their silver faces tight with anger as this primitive alien walked among them like an equal. General Morath, the eldest and proudest of them, refused to even look at the human. Admiral Kireth kept his hand near his weapon, as if Danny might attack at any moment. Only Commander Cirith, who had seen what the human could do, watched with open curiosity. Show me how you fight, Danny said. Morath bristled. We have fought wars since before your species crawled out of the mud. And you're losing this one, Danny said simply. So show me. They showed him. Holographic displays filled the room with ships and planets, battle formations, and strategic positions. Danny watched carefully, asking questions, taking notes on a small pad he had borrowed from Katie. He was not a military genius. He had been a sergeant, nothing more. But he had learned some things in his years of service, and he could see problems that the Kirani could not. "You're too defensive," he said finally. "Every battle you wait for the Vorax to attack, then you try to stop them. You never push back. You never surprise them." "We do not start fights," Morath said stiffly. "We end them." "How's that working out?" Morath's 4 eyes narrowed with fury, but the Queen raised her hand for silence. "Explain," she said to Danny. Danny stood and walked to the holographic display. "Where I come from, we've been fighting each other since the beginning of our history. We've tried every kind of war you can imagine, and we've learned some things." He pointed at a Kirani fleet position. "You put your ships in neat formations, predictable patterns. The Vorax know exactly where you'll be and what you'll do. That makes you easy to beat." "Order is strength," Admiral Kyreth said. "Order is predictable. Predictable is dead." Danny started moving ships around on the display. "You need to be unpredictable. Hit them where they don't expect. Run when they think you'll fight. Fight when they think you'll run. Make them afraid of what you might do." "This is madness," Morath said. "These are tactics for barbarians." "Maybe," Danny said, "but barbarians are hard to kill." Over the following weeks, Danny taught the Kirani everything he knew about human warfare. He told them about guerrilla tactics, about ambushes and traps, about the power of fear and confusion. He told them stories from human history, the Greeks at Thermopylae, holding a pass against impossible odds, the Russians at Stalingrad, fighting for every street, every building, every room, the Vietnamese in their tunnels, defeating a superior enemy through patience and will. The Kirani listened with growing fascination. These humans had been fighting forever. They had turned war into an art, a science, a way of life. It was horrifying and impressive at the same time. "Your species is terrifying," Cyrith told Danny one evening. "You have only had space travel for a few decades. Yet you have spent your entire existence trying to destroy each other." "We're getting better," Danny said. "Slowly." "I hope so. If you ever decide to turn your attention outward—" She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. While Danny worked with the military, Katie was busy with her own project. The Kirani had brought her to their best research facility, where scientists studied everything from physics to biology. Katie's specialty was xenobiology, the study of alien life. She spent her days examining Vorax tissue samples, genetic codes, biological data. She was looking for something, anything, that might give the Kirani an advantage. She found it on the 32nd day. "Sound," she told the Queen and her council. "The Vorax have a weakness to certain sound frequencies." The Kirani scientists looked confused. "We have studied Vorax biology for years," one of them said. "We found no such weakness." "Because you weren't looking for it," Katie explained. "The Vorax communicate through vibrations. Their bodies are extremely sensitive to certain frequencies. If we can generate the right sound waves, we can cause them pain, confusion, even temporary paralysis." "Why did we not discover this ourselves?" the Queen asked. Katie hesitated. "Because you considered it dishonorable. Your records show that Kirani scientists identified sound-based weapons as a possibility decades ago, but the research was stopped. Using an enemy's biology against them was seen as unethical. The council murmured uncomfortably. Danny, standing in the corner, laughed out loud. Unethical, he said. They're trying to kill everyone you love. Who cares about ethics? We care, General Morath said coldly. We are not savages. We do not use dishonorable methods. Then you'll die honorably, Danny said. Is that what you want? To be remembered as the civilization that was too noble to survive? The room fell silent. Queen Valethris looked at Danny with an expression he could not read. Then she turned to Katie. Build the weapons, she said. Morath started to protest, but the queen silenced him with a look. We will fight this war with every tool we have. If that makes us less noble, so be it. I would rather be a living savage than a dead saint. The preparations took 3 more weeks. Danny worked with Karani commanders to redesign their tactics. Katie worked with scientists to build sound-based weapons. Seerith trained special units in the new methods, troops who would think like humans, fight like humans, win like humans. The Vorax, meanwhile, continued their advance. They took 2 more systems, destroyed 4 more fleets. They were confident now, arrogant. The Kirani were weak, they believed. The Kirani would fall. They did not know that everything was about to change. On the night before the final battle, Danny stood on a balcony of the royal palace, looking up at stars that were about to become a battlefield. Katie found him there, 2 cups of something that passed for coffee in her hands. You know this might not work, she said, handing him a cup. I know. We might all die tomorrow. I know that too. Katie stood beside her brother, looking at the same stars. Why did you really come for me? You could have sent a message, hired someone else, done anything other than fly into a war zone yourself. Danny was quiet for a moment. Because you're my sister. Because Mom died when you were little and Dad was useless and someone had to take care of you. Because you're the only family I have. And I wasn't going to let you die alone on some alien planet. Katie leaned against his shoulder. I love you, Danny. Love you too, kid. They stood there in silence, 2 humans from a small blue planet, waiting for a war that would decide the fate of an empire. Tomorrow would bring fire and death and chaos. Tomorrow would test everything they had learned, everything they believed. But tonight, they were just a brother and sister looking at the stars. The Vorax fleet arrived at Kiris Prime on a cold morning when the 3 moons still hung low in the purple sky. 300 ships, black as death, spreading across space like a shadow. At their center flew the flagship of Warlord Thexus, the greatest military commander the Vorax had ever produced. He had never lost a battle. He did not intend to start today. His message to the planet was simple. Surrender now, and some of you will be allowed to live as servants. Resist, and we will destroy everything you have ever built. Queen Valethris stood on the bridge of her own flagship, the Crystal Dawn, watching the enemy fleet on her screens. Danny stood beside her, along with Commander Cyrith and a dozen officers. The Queen's face was calm, but Danny could see the fear in her eyes. This was it. Everything they had worked for, everything they had planned, would be tested in the next few hours. How do you feel? She asked Danny quietly. Scared, he admitted. But that's normal. Fear keeps you sharp. And if we lose? Danny looked at her. Then we lose fighting. That's all anyone can ask for. Valethris nodded slowly. Then she opened a channel to the Vorax fleet, and her image appeared on every screen in the system, including Thexus's command bridge. Warlord Thexus, she said, her voice steady and strong. I have a message for you. The Vorax commander appeared on her screen, a massive creature covered in black armor, his eyes burning with contempt. "Speak your surrender, little queen." "Not a surrender," Velethris said. "A warning." She gestured, and Danny stepped forward into view of the camera. Thexus stared at the strange creature with confusion. "This is a human," Velethris said. "A representative of a species you have never encountered. They come from a small planet far from here. They are young, primitive by your standards, but they have taught us something valuable." She smiled, and for the first time, there was steel in her expression. "They have taught us how to fight." Danny looked directly at Thexus. "You've been winning because the Kirani fight by rules you understand. They don't anymore. Whatever you think you know about them, forget it. Everything changes today." Thexus laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "One alien and some new tricks will not save you. Attack!" The battle began. The Vorax fleet moved forward in their standard formation, expecting the Kirani to form defensive lines, as they always did. Instead, the Kirani ships scattered in every direction, seemingly random, apparently chaotic. The Vorax commanders were confused. This was not how the Kirani fought. Then the traps began to spring. Kirani ships hidden behind moons and asteroids emerged, striking at the Vorax flanks. Mines planted days ago detonated among the enemy formation. Small, fast attack craft darted through the chaos, hitting targets and disappearing before the Vorax could respond. The neat Vorax formation dissolved into confusion. On the ground, it was even worse for the invaders. Vorax landing parties touched down, expecting easy conquest. Instead, they found cities that had been turned into nightmares. Kirani soldiers fought from every building, every street, every shadow. They used tactics they had never used before: ambushes, traps, hit-and-run attacks. And whenever the Vorax tried to regroup, Katie's sound weapons activated. The effect was devastating. Vorax soldiers collapsed, clutching their heads, screaming in frequencies that no Kirani could hear. Their communication systems failed, their coordination shattered. They had come expecting a weak enemy fighting by predictable rules. They found something else entirely. In space, Warlord Thexus watched his perfect battle plan fall apart. Ships were being destroyed that should have been untouchable. Positions were being lost that should have been secure. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he did not recognize: fear. "How?" he demanded. "How are they doing this?" On the Crystal Dawn, Queen Velethris was wounded in the third hour of battle. A Vorax missile struck the bridge, killing several officers and throwing the Queen against a wall. She was alive but unconscious, bleeding silver blood onto the floor. The bridge fell into chaos. Danny looked at the panicking Kirani around him. The attack had damaged their communication systems. Enemy boarding parties were on their way. Without leadership, the ship would fall, and without the flagship, the fleet would lose heart. He grabbed Commander Cyrith by the arm. "Get the Queen to safety. I'll hold the bridge." "You cannot hold the bridge alone," Cyrith said. "Then I'll hold it until you can send help." He picked up a fallen soldier's weapon, a rifle that felt strange in his human hands. "Go. Now." Cyrith hesitated, then nodded. She gathered a team to carry the Queen to the medical bay, leaving Danny with a handful of wounded soldiers on a damaged bridge. The Vorax boarding party arrived minutes later. There were 20 of them, massive warriors in black armor, expecting to find chaos and fear. Instead, they found one human standing in their way, holding a rifle he barely knew how to use, with a look in his eyes that said he would not move. "Come on, then," Danny said. They came. Danny was not a soldier anymore. He was not young or fast or strong like he had been. But he had something the Vorax did not understand: the simple, stubborn refusal to give up. He fired until his weapon was empty, then used it as a club. When that broke, he used his fists. When he could not stand, he crawled. He bought time with blood and pain and pure human stubbornness. When Cyrith returned with reinforcements, they found Danny on the floor surrounded by 8 dead Vorax. He was barely alive, covered in wounds, still trying to drag himself toward the last enemy soldier who had retreated in shock. "Hold the line," he mumbled through broken lips. "Hold the line." The battle ended 2 hours later. The Vorax fleet, battered and broken, retreated into deep space. Warlord Thexus, his confidence shattered, ordered the withdrawal himself. He had lost a third of his ships and most of his landing forces. For the first time in his career, he had been defeated. On Kairos Prime, the celebrations began even before the last Vorax ship vanished from sensors. People filled the streets, singing and crying and holding each other. They had survived. Against all odds, they had survived. Queen Valethris awoke in the medical bay to find Katie treating her wounds. "The battle?" she asked immediately. "We won," Katie said, smiling. "We actually won." The queen closed her eyes in relief. Then she opened them again. "Your brother?" "Alive, barely. He fought off an entire boarding party by himself." Katie shook her head. "He's an idiot, but he's a brave idiot." A week later, when both the Queen and Danny were well enough to stand, a ceremony was held in the great throne room. Thousands of Kirani gathered to witness something that had never happened before in their history. Queen Valethris stood before her people, with Danny and Katie beside her. Danny's arm was in a sling, his face still bruised, but he was standing. "Today," the Queen announced, "we begin a new chapter in the history of the Kirani Empire. Today, we declare a full alliance with the people of Earth. Not as a minor partner, not as a trade arrangement, but as equals. The humans have given us something we had lost: the fire to fight, the will to resist, the courage to never surrender." She turned to Danny. "Danny Cole, you came to us as a stranger. You stayed as a friend. You fought as a warrior. Your name will be remembered in our history forever." Danny looked uncomfortable with the attention. "I just did what anyone would do," he said. Valethris smiled. "That is exactly what makes you special. You believe that courage is ordinary. Among your people, perhaps it is. Among us, it is extraordinary." The celebrations continued for days. Danny and Katie were treated as heroes, invited to endless parties and ceremonies. Politicians wanted to talk to them. Scientists wanted to study them. Children wanted to meet the strange aliens from the distant blue planet. On the last night, before they were scheduled to return to Earth, Danny stood on the same balcony where he and Katie had watched the stars before the battle. The sky was clear, the 3 moons casting silver light over the crystal city. Katie found him there, just as she had before. "Ready to go home?" she asked. "I don't know," Danny said honestly. "A month ago, I was a construction worker with no plans and no future. Now, I'm some kind of galactic hero. It's a lot to process." "You were always a hero," Katie said. "You just didn't have a stage big enough for people to notice." Danny laughed quietly. "The guys at the bar are never going to believe any of this." "Probably not." They stood in silence for a while, looking at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vorax were regrouping, planning their next move. The war was not over. It would probably never be truly over. But for now, there was peace. For now, there was hope. "Hey, Katie," Danny said. "Yeah?" "Thanks for being stuck on an alien planet during an invasion. Really worked out for both of us." Katie punched his good arm. "You're an idiot." "Yeah," Danny agreed, smiling at the stars. "But I'm a helpful idiot." Far below, the city of Crystal glowed with celebration. The Kirani had learned something important from the humans, that sometimes the smallest people from the smallest places can change the course of history. Not through power or technology or ancient wisdom, but through the simple, stubborn refusal to give up. It was, Danny thought, a very human lesson, and maybe that was enough.